Those of you who have mostly come into meditation through me might be surprised to know that enjoyment is maybe not a common theme among Buddhist teachers. I at least didn't find that to be so. And there's a little more along the lines of strive on with diligence, which was something like the Buddha's last words. But kind of an interesting coincidence of two things happened probably about 20 years ago. I attended a retreat with a British monk, Ajahn Suchito, and he did talk about enjoyment. And it really struck a chord with me of how that shifted my relationship to what I'm doing. And got me out of my seriousness a bit. My project, the Mark Hart project, do any of you have that? Do you have your own version of that? Of how you might want your experience to go or change how you are and so forth. The call to relax, or the call to enjoy, just so relaxed me, a certain way, opened me. Whatever was working so hard, stopped working so hard. And that didn't seem to make the retreat less, what should I say? It didn't make me less present in the experience. So it's like enjoyment is the natural way to concentrate the mind. It's one of the things Suchito said. Joy is the natural way to relax. It's the natural way to be open. So when we practice enjoyment, if that's the right word, practice and enjoyment, putting those two together sounds a little odd. But it is what we're doing. It opens things up a bit. And then at the same time, I was teaching a course in Buddhism at Smith College. And it's really the only time I got to teach just a course on Buddhism. It was Theravada Buddhism, nonetheless, the type of Buddhism that I've mostly practiced and studied from Southeast Asia. And as a part of preparing to be like an academic about this stuff, I read a bunch of articles. I want to know like what scholars are saying on a wide variety of things. And I started following footnotes and reading articles that the footnotes led me to. And it was a pretty rich experience. But one path I went down is sort of the attempt to talk from a scholarly perspective about what did the Buddha really do that's different than anybody else at his time. You can get a certain kind of line about that within Buddhism, but what do scholars actually say who read these other texts from other traditions and so forth? And one of the things that struck me is how the Buddha really introduced the idea that meditation could be enjoyable. That it actually, that prior to that, all the evidence we have is that spiritual practices involved a lot of austerities and sort of torturing the body. If you torture the body enough, it sort of released the mind to have these various sort of spiritual experiences. And the Buddha was different. He actually, at the moment of his awakening, what happened is he remembered the experience of being a child in his father's garden and what it felt like to be in his father's garden and to be awake to the flowers and the grass. That sort of moment that is possible really for anybody, but it seems to define often a child's consciousness to be awake to things, really drinking them in. It was not a memory of trying really hard. It was a memory of being completely relaxed in one's environment and absorbed in it, absorbed in something we would identify as enjoyment. And when the jhanas in Buddhism, if you've never heard of them, there are these different levels of meditation, and some of the descriptions of them are quite beautiful. It's become more popular to teach about jhanas, but it was hardly talked about in the first 20 years of my Buddhist practice. But you don't need to know all about jhanas, but in the teaching about jhanas, sukha, ease, happiness, pleasure was important, was actually a sign of one's meditation approaching the level of jhana. Joy, piti, or rapture, and then sukha, which is well-being, happiness, ease, were all identified as meditative experiences. And so these certain scholars that I was reading was saying, well, that's really a very innovative thing in the whole spiritual tradition, yogic tradition. Who knows if they're right? Scholars have this way of trying to publish papers and make names for themselves, and it doesn't always pan out. And so if I had maybe stayed teaching this course on Buddhism, I could have, 5-10 years later, read all the refutations of this point of view by somebody else and yada, yada. But anyway, for this tonight, it's like those two things kind of came together. Wow. Enjoyment. That's worth spending some time with. So it really changed my focus. And so I often encourage people to enjoy breathing. And I'm still a little puzzled as to what happens, what that shift is when you actually start to enjoy something, rather than what you might do when you're just instructed to pay attention to the breath. Paying attention sounds like work, doesn't it? It involves effort. Enjoyment actually involves effort too, but it's a different kind of effort. There's something that shifts us from one attitude to another, and that's obviously an effort of some sort, but it's not the same. It's like something falls open a bit in the experience. I tried out the idea tonight of investing your heart in the breath. I don't know if I've ever said that before. I did use the word investing on the retreat, but to see if that captured it, what that was. What was happening naturally to the Buddha in the garden, his father's garden, in those moments where he was awake and relaxed and tickled to be there. I don't know that you're necessarily going to be tickled to breathe, but there's something that is intrinsically satisfying about breathing. It makes sense because, of course, it's absolutely essential to our lives. So, right built into the experience is the felt sense of well-being. Breathing is happening. And for whatever reason, it helps me to think of myself as an animal. When I say breathing animal, I become more like my dog. The simplicity of that. The times when she just sits there and she kind of looks somewhere or looks at me, and she's just breathing. there are these moments, unself-conscious moments, when we're just out in the world and we stop and we just breathe and we're just there. We don't even call it meditating. Thank goodness. Even the word meditating, it kind of burdens it with a something like this. You got to do something. You got to, But it's like the mind falls open and is there and enjoys being there. The there-ness has an intrinsically wholesome and happy tone to it. Amazing. So I've had the misfortune, shall we say, of having a couple of experiences recently that underlined how great breathing is. I told this one on the retreat. Those of you who weren't there haven't heard it. I had this choking episode the week before Christmas. And my children had come home. The whole family was here, and we went out to a restaurant. And I swallowed something wrong, and it ended up blocking my breathing. And for a while, I was just kind of there at the table, like trying to quietly do something about it, swallow it, whatever. And then suddenly I realized this is a real emergency. And I kind of stood up, and I had tried to swallow some water to see if that would like help, and it made it worse. And so I stood up and spit everything out, and everybody stood up, and I showed them to pat my back. And my daughter and son were really just so amazing. My daughter has done this wilderness first responder training, so she knows all about this stuff. And she just like kind of calmly assessed the situation, and and then Sam did the Heimlich maneuver, and it didn't work. And Annie understood that my breathing passage wasn't completely blocked, and so Heimlich maneuver works the best when it's completely blocked, so that of air can really grab behind it and toss something out. So she had me like throw myself over a chair, which is a great thing to do because it gets you upside down very quickly. And the gravity kind of worked, and the shock of like hitting the chair all kind of worked, and I suddenly could breathe again. So, just to tell the story, there happened to be two former medics in the restaurant that night, but they didn't really do anything. Wasn't even aware of them until I sort of got back, stood up, and was okay. But yeah, I've never experienced that before, really not being able to breathe. And I would say it's not, panic doesn't seem like quite the right word. It's this acute focus around survival. Panic would seem a little too, you get panicky when you have the luxury in some way to go, and have a reaction. But this felt just so primal, so focused and primal. And I, obviously everybody's grateful, including myself, that I didn't asphyxiate. And, but it has given me, I have to say, a different take on breathing. And so I share that with you just so that you don't have to have the experience. Maybe you can have a renewed appreciation of breathing without having to have a choking experience. A friend of mine died by choking, and I just can't imagine what that experience was like. Now I have a glimmer, but I still, I got out of it. So another experience that's like really hitting home, whatever, this is like breath time for Mark, is I just got a CPAP machine last week, and I'm like trying to get used to it. because I have significant sleep apnea. And it makes breathing really weird, I have to say. It hasn't been an easy thing to get used to. I've had bad nights and good nights. I have to say, I had one night that was absolutely incredible sleep. And I couldn't believe how different I felt in the morning. That was following a complete disaster. And then another complete disaster followed it, where I just couldn't fall asleep. I was like, this machine makes me too self-conscious about breathing. And just like relaxing around it seems really difficult. So I just got a different mass today. So in terms of just the story, everything's well. I think I'm going to learn how to do this. Millions of people have done it, and it can really make you feel better. But it just underlines again just what a completely elemental experience we are involved with when we're breathing. So if you can take away a little of your taking for granted of breathing, which I think is part of what it takes to enjoy something. It's a piece of it, is like stripping off the habitual, oh, I got this, I know this, around an experience, and feeling it afresh. So your assignment this week is to enjoy breathing. Enjoy breathing when you're meditating. And in all my classes, I encourage you to meditate every day. Nobody checks up on you, of course, and I know that everybody doesn't. But it's a good thing to develop the habit for, and this is a great opportunity, be in class to develop the habit of a daily meditation. But in that meditation, enjoy breathing. Let that be really an exploration for you. And what that is, notice what that is that happens when you intend to enjoy it. And what it is that happens when you are actually enjoying it, because those are sometimes not exactly the same. What happens when you're actually enjoying something? And then when you're not meditating, enjoy breathing too. Once in a while, just breathe to enjoy it. Breathe when you wake up. Breathe when you go outside. Just wake up a bit around that experience. One thing that I notice, at least when I'm enjoying breathing, meditating, I'm not doing this other thing, which I think I was trained in early on, which trained in not such a great way, which is this striving to stay with the breath longer and longer and not have my mind wander. There was just a whole lot of emphasis around that. It is true, as you meditate and you settle, the mind stays put more. There is some effort needed around that. Draw yourself back from just daydreaming and thinking. Those are absolutely true. But what isn't necessary is there was a kind of a joylessness about it, and a creating a standard around what was a good meditation. And I've really tried in my classes to not create that standard. I may have inadvertently done it on occasion. That standard of a good meditation is when your mind stays put and doesn't wander. or the idea that you're really trying to fashion a particular sort of mind by meditating. All of that burdens the experience of meditating in a certain way. And it actually makes the ego stronger. Enjoyment confounds the ego. It confounds that part of us which wants to do everything right, that measures our progress, that wants to be in control. Enjoyment's a paradox about that. You can't control enjoyment. And that's the paradox of having you enjoy breathing. There's an effort of sorts. It doesn't just happen automatically, but it's very different than most types of effort that we know. And there's such fertile territory in exploring what that is to direct the mind towards something that actually has less ego or a relaxed ego. What is that? What kind of effort is that? I encourage you to explore that this week. It's a really fruitful thing to come to understand. All right.